Let's explore the different developmental stages of love and the intersection with marriage. The child and the inner child loves because it needs, and loves whoever meets the child's need. The child's need for survival, security, love and belonging, validation, the support to explore and develop gifts, bring those gifts out into the world and become a part of a dream, something bigger than the self. But most importantly, the child loves around attachment, meaning the child's attachment template, if it's healthy, is strong, needs to be secure, and is based on need. When you fall in love, it is in typically the childlike state, as long as the innocence has not been cauterized by too much trauma and brutality. When you fall in love, it's the love of a 2-year-old who needs to be there, who needs to be adored, who needs and who loves because the need is met. Now, when the love of the child for secure emotional and physical attachment is not met, the child hates. And the hate emerges in the recipe of pain, of shame, because when the child's need is not met, the child is incapable of meeting their own need. And there are regions of the psyche, regardless of the maturity and development of the individual, there are regions of the psyche that desperately need, number one, and cannot meet the need within the psychological domain of the child. And so when those childlike states, or when the regressed wounded child states, as in the case of unresolved trauma, are entered individually or as a couple, if the couple is loving the wounded child in that phase of the relationship, which is a recurring pattern, meaning in order to deepen and grow as an individual, one must enter the real estate of the psyche in which profound need is present and activated. You're parachuted into the war zone of desperate need of the child. And at this point, one of two things happens. The abuse, betrayal, abandonment, trauma dynamic is reenacted, in which case both the adult and adolescent of the individual and the adult and adolescent in their partner abandon ship. And then you've got two children who cannot meet their own needs and so are desperately clawing to have someone else, an adult, meet those needs. And when your family template is of growing up in a dynamic where the more needy the child, the more brutal the parent. Now, why does this happen? Well, when parents grew up in families where their innocence and their need was not protected, not honored, not held in container, but was brutalized, was traumatized, was betrayed, was humiliated, was shamed. Because in a chauvinistic cult of trauma, the most vulnerable feminine states of need within the psyche are the kind of blinking light to attract the bully and the sociopath within the self, within the cult, within the family system. So the tremendous frustration of the unappreciated adolescent of the frustrated, shame-based adolescent in an abusive family. When they see the need and innocence of a younger sibling, desperately calling out for an adult, their mirror neurons connect with their own wounded inner child, which they experienced in that same family system. They remember the state of absolute helplessness, overwhelm, and despair of their own inner child. And they remember what they had to do within their own inner dialogue, within their own internal relationships, in order to survive that ordeal. And when the parent hits the child because it's crying, it doesn't get more sociopathic than that. You need something. I find the need to be irritating and an invasion of my needs, because I'm a child in a grown-up body. I'm an entitled adolescent in a grown-up body. And so I hit my child to communicate the message: fuck you, little kid. Get the fuck out of here. I want to watch TV, and you're interfering with my need, and I've got the power. I've got the bigger body. And you better learn that this family is about meeting my inner child's needs and my inner adolescent's needs as the father, as the mother. That's all you're here for. And if you don't get with the fucking program, I have complete disgust. Because I'm an adolescent. I'm waiting for it to be all about me. And you're not getting with the program. Now, the overwhelming force of a grown-up doing this to a traumatized, helpless, terrified 2-year-old who cannot bond emotionally with either parent, etc., is devastating. But some part of the brain comes to the rescue, because the brain says, aha, we're not in an empathic household. We're in a reptilian, sociopathic household. We need to switch brains. Please, little one, regress 200 million years ago to the crocodile brain. You're surrounded by reptiles. Now, in a reptilian environment, the strong do not protect the weak. The strong prey on the weak. You can think of the British fagging system in public schools, the protocol of the generals sending the new recruits to be cannon fodder for the nobility of the country. Well, if you just look at the psychology of mothers giving their sons for the great British Empire, for whatever bullshit your country is up to, the conquering of this and that and the other. We have to invade the West Indies. We can't possibly just keep our children alive and enjoy our family life at home. No, this is a protocol of sacrifice. And it's noble to, stand in rank, etc. Don't dodge around so that the enemy could miss you. No, it's a noble thing, to come back wounded or dead, preferably, for the family name. Well, where does this come from? Well, it's the same nobility of the scapegoated child who's supposed to suck it up, stiff upper lip, and endure the cruelty, insanity, and abusive power of the father figure, who is, of course, entitled to hit his wife, to scold his children, and then to ignore them and say, go off and do this, and then go out and make lots of money, preferably mistreating workers and things like that. Go out and make lots of money and make me proud and send it back home. Or you're no son of mine, and heaven forbid you're a daughter, right? You know, this archetype is foundational to many of the relationship patterns of our entire Western cult. Domination, sacrificing the employees for the company owners, sacrificing the poor people. If you're poor, of course, let's not help you. Let's send you off to be cannon fodder for the rich. If you're poor, let's not help you. Tend the land that has been granted to the rich. You don't get granted land because you're poor and loving your family. You get granted land because you were a general in a war for the empire, or because your father was a duke. So let's give you let's have the king give you another 10,000 acres. Then you can have some peasants whose job is to make that land productive, and then you'll take half of it. And it's great to be the king in the sociopathic paradigm. And of course, when this gets too outlandish, you have revolution. But this pattern of might makes right, and this masculine sociopathic persona within the cult and within the ego personality is, very strong. Meaning it permeates the cult. It's highly incompetent in many ways, because if you want the wealthiest, most successful possible framework, you do something like the Danish. In Denmark, everyone is college educated. Everyone has excellent health care. Everyone is supported to train for and do jobs that they love and are good at. And the wealthiest people are taxed to ensure the framework which ensures that every member of the country is highly educated, highly competent, and healthy. Now, if you look at it purely mathematically, if you want the well-being for your people, you want everyone to be educated, in good health, highly competent, and able and willing to bring their talents into the culture. There is no better mathematical probability field. Now, if you take half of those people and you just deny them an education, and you work them into the bone, so they're die off sooner. You can think of Stalin and Maoist China as being the peak of this, because Stalin and Mao killed off the educated, because the educated could point out the corruption and the fallacy in the paradigm. So now they're the enemy of the system. So you kill them all off. You burn the books, you shoot the professors, you humiliate them, you burn down the universities. Then you give people little or no education, and then you put them into manual slave labor, supposedly for the good of the people. But in Maoist China if you were to take a survey of the mental, emotional, physical, financial, social well-being of every person on the continent and compare it with something like Denmark, you'd have two polar opposites. Misery, fear, short lives, high death rates, high degree of despair, high degree of family abuse, high degree of misery, low degree of creativity. You have a tremendous amount of hatred towards yourself as an organization if you adopt that protocol. Whereas, again, Denmark, I was stunned at the staggering statistics that I found in my interviews. Every single person employed, every single person liking their job, every single person liking their country, every single person having more quality time than the average American. Beautiful parks, bicycle lanes, high degrees of sustainable energy, high degrees of trust, low levels of crime, zero homelessness, and that's the goal. To have highly competent, well-educated people in good health who like and do their jobs well. That's the gold standard, those results. Now, how do you get to those results? Well, there we get into dogma or science, because the capitalist dogma and the communist dogma both will say they want those results. And you have Cuba as the best case scenario in health, but you have higher degrees of crime and poverty and certain issues. But if Cuba is probably one of the best experiments kind of going with the communist dogma, and America is supposedly one of the best for enacting the free market capitalist dogma, in which basically capital is elevated above the people who make it. People are to be used and exploited and hired and fired to make capital. The capital is above the people. And then you have a socialist democracy that is within a capitalist framework in Denmark, where they've actually produced the results. Happier people, more employed people, healthier people, people whose needs, survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing their gifts, bringing those gifts into the world, and being part of something bigger than themselves, are met. More than almost any other planet in the Western framework, and more than any communist dogmatic system. So that's what you want if you care about human beings, yourself and other people. It's also necessary if you care about the empathic brain. You can be a very sophisticated sociopathic reptile with a university degree, chauvinistically mandated to develop linear thought and dissociate from feelings. You can train a reptile, which is the most sophisticated capitalist, is a reptile that fights anything smaller than it. You can think Microsoft and the software wars, that runs from anything bigger than it, that freezes and tries to please or manipulate and maneuver through. But you're basically dealing with a fear-based sociopathic drive that is educated to a university degree in terms of capitalist strategies for employing manipulation and fear to extract the most amount of dollars not for the workers, but for the shareholders, the people who need it the least. In an empathic paradigm, who's in the most pain? How can I help? In the reptilian paradigm, who is most vulnerable and how can I exploit them? Because a reptile never attacks a bigger animal than themselves because they might lose. And the reptile is fear-based. It's not about right and wrong. If you're bigger than me, I'll collude with you or I'll run from you. If you're smaller than me, I'll exploit you. And so the greatest kind of path to dominance in the capitalist framework is to become big enough that you're the biggest giant in town, and then bully the shit. Dominate, intimidate to the best possible degree within the law, and then try and break the law underhand here and there and skirt around it and abuse monopoly power. To kill off the competition so that you've got a monopoly that you can exploit for the benefit of a few shareholders. Now, the shareholder, by definition, is someone who has free money to invest. So they don't need money. No one who's struggling to buy groceries or buy a house buys shares in a company because they're more intelligent than that. So everyone who's poor is putting all their money into food and clothes and medicine and housing and education if they're at all intelligent. And if they're too disillusioned with the sociopathic edict, they're putting it all into drugs and pain management strategies. And so to design a system that funnels more and more money to the people who need the least money, the investor, and that sacrifice the people who need the most money, we're dealing with a reptilian brain. Now, admittedly, we're on a continuum. So the data is in that dictatorship and uneducated people with poor health care. I mean, Stalin murdered 40 million of his own people in gulags and work camps to a point where Russians and Ukrainians needed to be cannibals to get through the winter. You know, they would starve, they'd shoot you if you didn't go along with it, and if you starved to death to send grain to Moscow, well then your brother starved out in the snow, and your siblings would cut him up and fry him in the kitchen and get through the winter. Well, that's fine when you don't care about people, when you care about dogmas, when you care about image. Because Stalin shot and tortured the press for trying to actually communicate that the dogma isn't working. Because in sociopathic power structures, you have to fight to protect the dogma and the leader, not the people. So the truth was a threat to Russian dogma. So kill off the people and hide the truth. And spend the money building up a military and create a great PR campaign. That is brilliant, sociopathic, analytical, university-trained thought. If you understand patterns and you're a reptile, Stalin is brilliant. Hitler's pretty great too. Mao didn't do quite as well. Free market capitalism with a support for the entrepreneurial base is, of course, significantly better. The data is in. But the happiest people who most consistently meet human needs: survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing their gifts, bringing those gifts out into the world, are socialist democracies. Russia and Mao was not a democracy. And it wasn't capitalist based. And so many of the Scandinavian countries, but I interviewed the people in Denmark and was just floored by the statistics. Not one person I interviewed didn't like their country, didn't like their life, didn't like their job, wasn't college educated, didn't have great health care. It's like, wow, why wasn't I born here? You know, and it takes a certain sociopathic dogma for your country's leadership not to borrow from the best operating system around based on science. Meaning the right to pursue liberty and the pursuit of happiness, liberty and happiness, are something per capita that the Danish have by at least a 50% margin. Now, for a doctor to insist on giving a drug that is more expensive and performs 50% worse when there's another drug available that they could apply is malpractice, would get you fired from a competent hospital. But a political dogma leader that insists on self-referential identity politics will say, we are these people. We are the capitalists. We hate the communists. We don't like anything. This is who we are, and we're going to stick with it. Screw the science. Well, it feels good, doesn't it? We're those ones. We're not changing. We're not budging for anyone. Even for someone that can teach you something, that can help your people, that have better data sets, you know, and there again, you have the politics of identity, which is the politics of trauma, which is the politics of fear, which are the politics that win in a psychologically illiterate, highly traumatized democracy. Because if you can vote for anyone and you're psychologically illiterate and highly traumatized, the most attractive thing for a traumatized person who is defined by having experienced repeated events that were so big and so sociopathic that they threatened the identity of the person. So when you have heavy logs crashing against your body and threatening to destroy its integrity, you can't think, you're terrified, but what you cling to reactively is your old identity. You're not in the conscious analytical state to evaluate, maybe it's my interest, maybe it's in my interest in order to benefit my well-being and my family's well-being to adopt a new identity. That would take thought and the time and framework of thinking without fear. If you are in trauma and under siege, what you cling to is the last known identity. And what you don't consider is data. You instinctively hold to who you are. And you are vulnerable. Because as a traumatized person, you are vulnerable to fear. It's your number one deity. The number one goal of every trauma survivor who has not dealt with their trauma is, I never want to feel that way again. Feel what way again? Helpless, in pain, surrounded by reptiles, confused and overwhelmed. That's trauma. Well, now all you have to do to gain leadership rank in a traumatized democracy is you need to create false enemies. You don't question the cult memes which are producing these statistics. You blame the Russians, the communists. You do witch hunts and pretend it's out there, and you say, I'll protect you. They're the bad guys. They're really bad. They're coming for you, and I'll protect you. The slaves are going to take over. The African Americans are going to have sex with your women. The workers are unionizing. It's a disaster. Get them. Don't look at the data. When you have a traumatized populace, threaten them with forced change and then promise to rescue them from it. You'll climb to the top, and you'll have a sociopathic, fear-based democracy that is based on ignorance rather than on science. Because if you're intelligent and you're paying attention, if you learn that the average Danish person in a country that freezes over for half the year with almost no light is happier, more educated, more skilled, has higher average wages per person, and likes their work and their country more than the majority of your people. If you are a leader, you follow the data and the science. If you are a doctor, you follow the data and the science. And you look at what protocol, what medicine, what law system, what thought system, what emotional, what cultural system is producing the highest levels of sustainable human well-being per person with the least amount of unnecessary suffering. That points in the Western world squarely at Denmark. How do you know you're being led by a reptile? They're not interested in that. They're interested in maintaining the leadership role. How do you know? Because they use negative campaigning, negative ads, lies, misinformation, and identity politics to elicit fear in the other, in change and in the new, to promise to rescue them from the fear they've induced with all that misinformation and pummeling of the reptilian brain. And they use their power to enrich their own families, allies, and look good at the expense of the majority of their people. You are being led by a reptile. Science is the friend of the rational brain, of the empathic brain, and of the transcendent brain. Science is not the primary focus for the limbic and the reptilian brain. Having said that, the most sociopathic and effective leaders, whether it's Pol Pot or Stalin or Hitler, Donald Trump, use a highly attuned analytical filter to figure out how to exploit the fear in the majority of their people in order to benefit themselves, because that is appropriate for a crocodile. That's how crocodiles survived. It just doesn't lead to the best results. It's one of the reasons why trauma literacy is the linchpin between a cycle of violence and a transformation towards the empathic brain, which leads to an empathic protocol. Who's in the most pain? How can we help? It's that simple. When you're in a group or in an environment where those two questions are not asked regularly, when you're in a group, when you're in a county where the people in the most need are the homeless, and no one's asking how they can help, and there's more and more homeless, you're in a reptilian field. Now, reptiles breed reptiles, just like empaths breed empaths. It's just that reptilian algorithms and operating systems consume more energy per unit of sustainable well-being delivered by a factor of more than 10. If you have 10 people operating as reptiles, they will consume 10 times more energy, time, money, and natural resources to create 1/10 the amount of sustainable well-being in that group. Because there's a good argument to be made that if you are a reptile operating a reptilian operating system, you're not experiencing that much well-being anyway. The best feeling for a reptile is destroying an enemy. Well, when you live in a country where you're surrounded by your own people, if the best feeling you can hope for as a reptile is to win at the expense of your own people, I beat that company and bankrupted them. I used a leveraged stock option buyout, sacked all the employees, sold off the assets, and made $200 million. And I'm looking for the next one. And that's the best it gets. I don't even have anything to do with $200 million other than to buy a bigger company and sack more people and ship it overseas and get my stock option bonus. That's me. That's the best it gets. Feel warm and fuzzy inside? No, you feel like a reptile. It's not the result you get from who's in the most pain, how can we help, what is the operating system that facilitates every one of our people surviving, feeling secure, having love and belonging. So there's a place for the competitive marketplace. You know, Denmark does all three. It's a democracy. It's capitalist. It's free market capitalist. But it's also socialist, meaning we have a commitment that every one of our people are going to go to school, are going to go to college, are going to have great health care, and are going to be trained well for high-paying jobs, are going to have excellent maternity benefits, we're going to have great parks, we're going to have sustainable energy, and we're going to have a higher quality of life. And we will tax the wealthiest to fund that commitment. Well, this is very much in line with Sonia Lyubomirsky's work on happiness. Basically, what she says is that after your survival and pleasure needs are met, and your security is met, money does not contribute to your well-being. Which means that if you're a Warren Buffett with $58 billion to your name, you don't feel 58 billion times happier than the person who has 100,000 to their name. You feel about 10% happier. So you have 58 billion rather than 100,000, you feel 10% happier. And it's mostly because in a psychologically illiterate cult, where money is valued more than human beings, if you have a lot of money and everyone's brainwashed into believing that money is more important than people, so the people who have the money are important by association, now you have a framework that says, wow, I wish I could be Warren Buffett. I wish I could be an abused child who's so dissociative I can walk over my own son in order to keep my stock routine. I wish I could crunch numbers and pay attention to numbers rather than human beings. I wish I could have difficult family relationships. I wish I could be dissociated from my own feelings. Because if I could have all those with $58 billion and everyone around me looking and saying, wow, you're so important and you're on TV in a cult that focuses on fame, wow. It does feel good in a cult that is fame-based and capitalist to be famous, to have lots of money. Not because the money does that much for you, but because we need love and belonging. And if a cult has been brainwashed to love and welcome whoever is rich and punish and shun anyone who's poor, it feels good to be welcomed and respected. But if the cult was scientifically educated to value human beings who were contributing well-being, whether they were poor or rich, everyone would get that honor because they're a human being contributing to the well-being of the group. And Buffett would be sidelined because pursuing capital for capital's sake at the expense of human beings is nothing to write home about. It's good reptilian protocol. It's just nothing to revere if you're psychologically literate. So the child loves very conditionally whoever meets their needs. The child is a narcissist, is self-absorbed, offers highly conditional love, and will manipulate and go through all the contortions of manipulation. Can I please you? Can I be useful to you? Can I intimidate you? What do I have to do to get my needs met? I'm a child. A child will descend into the reptilian brain, becoming more and more Machiavellian the less their needs are met because they exist. Because a child depends on the giants around them to meet their needs. That's child love. And when you fall in love, you're falling in love with the idea that you are my perfect mother, my perfect father, my perfect deity, my perfect grown-up. You're going to meet my needs to survive, to feel secure, to have love and belonging, to have outside validation. That's the child's primary focus, is the lower needs. Why do rich guys in a sociopathic paradigm get the attractive babes? Well, 2 reptiles, 2 children. I want what makes me look good. Okay, that's the attractive babe. I want security and survival. That's the rich guy in a capitalist framework. So, pretty women line up, okay? I mean, thank goodness we now have female billionaires, so it'll go the other way around. Pretty boy, line up. One who makes me look good, line up. You want survival and security? I want to look good. And I've got options because in a sociopathic paradigm, there are a lot of people who do not have survival and security lined up. So you can get the love of the child. It's why it's called a sugar daddy, not a sugar partner, because you're not a partner when it's a prostitution relationship where, thank goodness, someone will take care of me. And thank goodness, I can manipulate and control arm candy that'll make me look good and satisfy my ego. And we'll both get our needs met. 2 children in a reptilian framework. The healthiest parent, given that the child will do whatever they need to get their needs met, the healthiest parent looks at the statistical data out there and says the best odds of you meeting your needs to survive, feel secure, love and belonging, etc., is for you to learn these subjects, learn these etiquettes, associate with these people, do these activities, learn these skills, and these habits. You will have the highest odds in this cult of ascending into self-sufficiency if you do those things. Therefore, you have the unconditional love of the mother just for being, and the father, or the masculine energy, will say, no, you got to earn it. And how you get my survival and security and support is you get grades studying this, you do these things, you do meet those things, you do those things, but it's for the child's interest. It's not for the parent's ego. It's actually, I want my child to be happy. Now, this does not require the child to become a reptile in order to survive. You start sending a 6-year-old out for prostitution to buy mom drug money, and that 6-year-old needs to become a reptile because by definition she is surrounded by reptiles. Her mother's a reptile, destroying the innocence and future of her child, risking her child's life daily to get her heroin hit. Her father's a reptile because he left or goes along with it. You don't leave 6-year-old girls when you have an empathic brain. Her government's a reptile because this is good for the GDP of the country, right? Sex tourism, economy, mom's paying her taxes and buying her heroin habit. Who cares about the 6-year-old? And finally, you have the reptilian John, who says, I've fucked over enough 20 and 30-year-olds. I think I want to experience the ultimate power of damaging a 6-year-old's body for my pleasure. Is that enough for your ego? Enough? Scarred for life, given birth to another reptile. Yeah, just something about that. I want that power. I want to feel really big. And I'm going to do it by making someone feel really small. And there's not quite the same aura of fear in a 40-year-old woman who looks at me with pity that I don't have any connection to my empathic brain. I think I'll go for the 6-year-old. So she's surrounded by reptiles, and she becomes a reptile to survive. And then we interview her on 60 Minutes when she becomes the only serial killer female, right? That's a good news story. Let's not worry about her psyche. Let's not challenge the cult that stood by and let this happen. Let's get the interview, because we've got a reptilian reporter who's got a reptilian boss, and reptilian stories of fear and gore and lust. That's what reptiles like to read. Sells. So you have the complete reptilian system. And let's blame it on the woman who has enough and starts shooting up men she's come to associate with serpents because they operate from the reptilian brain. Child love. You have adolescent love. I want, I desire. So good reptilian John for the 6-year-old. I want, I desire, I'm curious. Adolescents are self-centered, narcissistic, all about me, highly curious, want to find themselves. They depend on elders, people who have faced death, have been initiated into a relationship with something bigger than themselves, and will fight and put their lives on the line to protect the innocence of the young in their care. Be it the traumatized grown-up who feels 3 years old, or be it a 5-year-old who's not getting the education she needs because her mother's got a gambling habit and she can be put out in the rice fields. Or she can be left to dissociate with perverted Uncle Harry, or even worse, alone, in front of the TV while we go out and get our addiction. The adolescent loves conditionally, narcissistically. You've got the right breast side, oh, your pussy feels good. I like that feeling. I want it. People are looking at you. They'll look at me if you're next to me and this, I want it. Nothing wrong with an adolescent. If you understand, you're dealing with a narcissist, and in our cult, probably a sociopath. Because in sociopathic environments, the reptilian brain climbs rank more efficiently than the empathic brain. Reptiles smell empathy and obliterate it. Because to a reptile's eyes, empathy is weakness. That's why a sophisticated reptile will pretend they broke down on the road. Please help me. Oh, good, it's an empath. Wonderful. As soon as they get out, quick rape, steal their money, kick them in the bushes. It's wonderful when reptiles can feed on empaths. And it's wonderful that we raise another round of reptiles in a cult that won't take care of its people. Takes care of its military. Really? Give more young men PTSD as an excuse to fund massively over budget defense programs so you can be the bully of the whole world. That's a good one, isn't it? A superpower. Let's spend 25 times more money for our military than anyone else on the planet. While we have homeless people, people dying of curable diseases, uneducated, and an epidemic of childhood abuse. Still, as long as we can bomb someone more efficiently than anyone else, faster, as long as we can spread the pall of fear and look good about it, right? Let's not pretend that we're the terrorist because we spread terror. No, we'll terrorize the world and then we'll just spin it because we're psychologically illiterate. We'll spin it and we'll call our terrorization a war on a feeling. The war on terror. How do you fight the war on terror? Well, we terrify people. We drop bombs on weddings. We send drones into other countries and blow up apartment complexes because there might have been a terrorist in there. Now, there certainly is a terrorist pressing the button. that person just destroyed 100 families. Let's give them a Purple Heart. You did your job, son. Keep up the good work. Those terrorists, we got to get them. The axis of evil. Of course, we're nowhere on it. It's all about them. So the adolescent loves because you meet their needs. And they get rid of you as soon as you don't. What does an adolescent need? And they desperately need to look good, feel hot, look good, be important, survive, feel secure, associate with powerful people. Good reptile. Maybe they're 15. They'll sell their body to a millionaire. They can count on a buyer as long as they look good. There's enough Jeffrey Epsteins out there. I want what I want. What do you need? You know, it's a negotiation for a child and adolescent. And who do you negotiate with? The one with the money, the one with the power. And that's, of course, the goal of a competent sociopath, is to have the power and the money and to be able to dispense it. Of course, the little bit of empathy in there doesn't want to look bad, so has to do some good cover work and stuff there, but that's just so we can do the back room, you know, bargaining and the like. So, child and adolescent, negotiated, need-based love. Ah, I feel so good when I fuck you. I need to fuck you. You've got exams coming up. Don't worry about the exams. You don't need them. Come, I gotta fuck you again. An adolescent will destroy the future of their love interest to feel good in the moment. That's what they're supposed to do. They're adolescents. They don't know. You can't teach an adolescent to be an adult when all the giant grown-ups around them are behaving like adolescents, just getting away with it more because they got more power and money. In a marriage, the inner child and the inner adolescent of you and your partner does not go away. I desperately need security and love and someone who isn't going to abandon me. Adolescent over there wants to fuck you. Are you going to abandon me? No, I'm not going to abandon you. Come on, what do I have to say so I can get fucking, right? No, I'm not going to. So you have all the betrayal dynamics in a reptilian framework. Children betraying children, children desperately trying to get the needs met of children, children being betrayed and exploited by adolescents, adolescents being manipulated to get their needs met by children. Child and adolescent love can range from being healthy to profoundly unhealthy within the paradigm of need. I need, and it's all about me. Now, in a marriage, the inner child and inner adolescent do not go away. They exist as much as they ever do. And in many cases, the adult has never emerged. We don't have elders. We rarely have adults who sacrifice themselves to protect the innocence and dignity of the child. Oh, they may sacrifice themselves for their military or for their capitalist bosses, but for the innocent of the child, you see, that's a little bit too sophisticated for the American cult. They haven't really experienced what it's like to have an adult take a stand for you for no other reason than to expend political capital. In a sociopathic framework, the more empathy you show and protection for people who have no rank, you are expending capital. Because if you're climbing the rank of any system that is sociopathic, you pick out who can help you on your ascent, and you make yourself indispensable on the basis that when they climb up to power, they'll bring you up. Even if you're incompetent and can't do your job, they'll bring you up with you so that you won't spill the dirt on them and you'll keep covering up their dynamics. Think Trump and his family. So you have that dynamic within a cult system. Now, if you have to decide between a pure, competent political sociopath and someone who's empathic and cares about people who have no rank in the sociopathic cult, you will climb the rank system higher and faster if you ally with a pure sociopath, because they will never waste capital. They will only please someone who can help them get to the top. And if you only please that person, they'll help you get to the top faster. If you expend political capital fighting with your reptilian peers for the good of the country or the family or the wounded, if you're the brother in a sociopathic paradigm and the father has decided to pimp out the daughter or put her out in the fields so that the brother can make the father look good and get a college degree. If the brother fights the father for the lower ranking daughter in a chauvinistic paradigm, the father will become disgusted with the son, may disown him. He doesn't take better care of the daughter. You're breaking the mold of the system. If I'm the police chief and I'm expected to cover for all of my officers in a reptilian program, I'm not expected to obey the law, heaven forbid. I'm expected to see that none of the corrupt cops who drive around drunk with their signals flaring, this and that, I'm going to cover for you guys. And I'm your leader. Okay, that's the leader reptiles want. Okay, good. You're going to do that? Good. You're the leader. If the head of police starts worrying about the daughter of someone falsely shot by a cop and wants to get that daughter a good education, and so gives evidence against his own cop, who then has to fork over some of his meager cop salary. That's one good incentive to get involved with crime if you're a cop. We'll just give you a lousy salary and lots of power. You go out and be shot, threaten your life, develop PTSD, and just be honest with all that power, and we're not going to pay you very well. Well, you treat cops like reptiles, they become reptiles. Big deal. Well, now no one wants to vote for that police officer. You mean you're going to turn me in when I do my crime? When I drink a little bit too much, I thought we stick with our own. It's identity politics, not the ethics of the situation. The ethics of the situation is don't get caught. Okay, fine, I've got to, there's nothing I can do. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to turn you in here because you were too dumb. You left your car there. Bullets all match your gun. I've done my best to hide, I brought in all the black suspects in the neighborhood. But it doesn't explain why your car was there. Oh, gosh. The boss did what he could. We're still voting for him. See, if you expend capital to champion someone who has no rank, you look like a moron to a reptile. You look like a human being to an empath, to a human being. The empathic brain is the only thing that separates us from very smart crocodiles. We're not human until we're primarily engaged with the empathic brain. It's very difficult, though, to be primarily engaged with the empathic brain if in order to do so, you have to fight reptiles to champion children, innocents, and low-ranked people who are typically the target of reptiles. Someone who's never going to be able to pay you back the legal bills, because reptiles feed on poor people, weak people, low-ranked people, the minority race. It is reptilian operating system to feed on the most vulnerable. Because why on earth, if you're a reptile, would you waste energy fighting someone who's hard to fight? Like a rich person who's a good reptile with an armament of bodyguards and lawyers. You're not going to waste your time fighting a fellow reptile with rank when you could get 100 black people for the same dollar and feed on them. It makes no sense to a reptile. Well, when you see all the reptiles getting ahead, it hurts. When it hurts badly enough and you're humiliated enough, I don't want to feel. How do you stop feeling? Become a reptile. Down here, there are no feelings. There's just pattern analysis and prey. Fight, flight, freeze, and please. For a fear-based sociopathic agenda to survive, to feel secure, love and belonging is off the table. You're just surviving and feeling secure and trying to build ego. Build respect. From who? Other reptiles. You know, you enter some of these boardrooms where they just laid off a whole town to outsource a town to save a net profit of $20 per day per person. Oh, the cigars are out. The scotch is flowing. Congratulations are in, as are bonuses. And they have contempt for anyone who doesn't know how the game is played. A reptile despises the weakness of empathy. A human being is horrified to regress 200 million years to the crocodile brain when every human is born capable. They have the neurological circuitry to run empathic and transcendent programs. They're just not loaded. And to baseball one child over the head after another, to knock them back 200 million years, to climb another few inches in rank in a reptilian operating system is inhuman. But reptiles aren't human. But when you feel more, because you are human, to be associated with reptiles, when you feel more, it takes soul out of you. It knocks you back. You can't walk with the same pep in your step. Watching humanity deteriorate into crocodiles again. Because every generation it starts all over again. There is nothing stopping the human brain from realizing empathy and transcendence, except the systematic traumatization of our children and the anger at the children when they look up innocently and expect to be protected, when they expect an empath. Where are you in pain? How can I help? Who's in the most pain? How can I help? Is it working? What else can I do? The grief, the disappointment on their human faces as they grasp. Yeah, the grown-up has a sliver of empath. They know what's going on. But it's a little bit too painful and too much work to switch gears and become an empath. When next day at work, they're going to be bludgeoned if they don't go back into sociopathic, reptilian. It's hard to reward the reptile and fight for more pain, because as you enter the empathic brain in a reptilian environment, your pain goes up. As you enter the empathic brain in an empathic environment, your joy and your love and your safety goes up. So what's it going to be? If we create a cult that is reptilian, we will punish the human beings in that cult into oblivion, and will not stop at it until they become reptiles. So these inner childs, these inner adolescents, they're in each one of us. And they did what they had to do. They told the lies, they signed the contracts, they skewed the language, because the pinnacle of power is to bludgeon someone over the head and tear apart their soul and give them a contract and say, you want the next meal? Sign here. I, the undersigned, promise never to question my reptilian father, my narcissistic mother, never to point out the truth, never to make them look bad, and to call reptilian behavior love. Sign here. Okay, here's your bowl of Cheerios. Sorry, got to go. Little iPad thrown in. Off to work. Well, if you want to have love as an adult, you've got to deal with the mess created by all these reptilian contracts. How do you deal with them? Well, the adult is the first part of the developmental cycle that is capable of loving another without agenda, because they're also capable of loving their own inner child and inner adolescent without agenda, if they have been initiated into adulthood. Now, what do you need to initiate an adolescent into an adult? You need an adult. What do you need to load adult operating system onto the empathic brain? You need a disk, which means someone else needs to be running the program. You need a disk that has the adult program written out. An adult does not feed on the young. An adult is a human being. An adult is an empath that references the empathic regions of their brain. An adult is someone who asks, who's in pain? How can I help? Now, this is bad news for the reptilian program. That's not going to work very well. There's a lot of reptiles who will use and exploit that. and see it as weakness. There's a lot of people that need help. Let's just stay down here a little bit more, get needs met, and maybe once we've got a few million and got a little on the side and have some backup options and learn karate and stuff, we'll give a few $100 to the homeless shelter to offset 2 or 3 days of shelter for a population I helped to dehouse with my McMansion and $1 million homes. Not to mention the developer's interest in stating there shall be no tiny affordable homes in this development. This is a development for rich people. You want to move in and build an affordable house? It's against the law. Well, you have enough of those pieces of land and suddenly, you cannot build a tiny house legally anywhere in this county. Oh, now you need to sleep in your car? Too bad, we just passed an ordinance. You can be arrested for sleeping in your car after you move in there because you can't afford McMansion Row. And we know it's not good for poor people, but it's good for the property values of rich people because we don't like living next to poor people because it reminds us that they're human beings. I want to live next to people who are richer than me, who will bring up my property value. And then I'll sell and invest it so I can be richer, not so I can donate money to charity. It takes an adult to initiate an adult in an environment with a temperature that is not so cold that the first symptoms of initiation are frostbite, the shrinking, horrific pain of grasping just how miserable the empathic circuits are in the people around us, compounded by the fact that in a sociopathic environment that hates weakness, it also hates need. So the people who need the most hide it so they won't be preyed upon, which allows the reptiles to say everything's great, you see. I'm not surrounded by desperate, terrified, lonely people. They're all putting on a nice mask so that we can pretend this is a polite society. Now in a marriage, the child needs and the child needs. And the negotiation, this is not unconditional love, is can you meet my need and can I meet your need? Because if I can't, fuck you, I'm going to find someone else who can. There's no loyalty for a child. They look for where the food is. In an adolescent, can I satisfy your curiosity? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do this? I remember the email exchange I had with a college student. I was trying to figure out who she was and what she actually wanted. And she says, I don't want to tell you that. I'm perfectly aware that you as a reptilian male will only be interested in me as long as I'm fascinating, mysterious, sexy, and don't have any emotional baggage. So I've prepared a nice package. I thought you would like it. And I don't get why you're asking to see behind the mask. Nobody's interested in me. What a horrifying thing for a college-educated woman to have grasped with that degree of clarity in a reptilian cult. She is to be used for her body, and maybe she will be able to pawn off and trade that for certain symbols and symptoms of empathy and kindness to some degree. Maybe the reptile who's fucking her will be kind enough not to explicitly express his contempt for the needy, horrified, and lonely parts in her raised in a reptilian cult. But you've got strong conditional factions in the child and in the adolescent. And a match is, I'll do this for you, you'll do this for me in a child level. I'll do this for you, you do this for me in an adolescent level. Once those factions are met, assuming there is an adult present in the psyche, which is presuming a lot, the adult is the first one that can love without agenda and thus unconditionally. They are built on the foundation of the child's and adolescent's need being met. Meaning if the child and adolescent do not have their needs met, they will be screaming and manipulating and sabotaging until they do, because that's what children and adolescents do. You don't necessarily get to see the adult in your partner, if they emerge at all, until you've met enough of their child needs and their adolescent needs, and until they've met enough of their inner child's needs and their adolescent's needs, so they quiet down and say, okay, I'm going to survive, I'm going to look important and get my curiosity and my lust and whatever. Okay, so they've calmed down. So now that I've had my orgasm and I've done this and I feel important and I'm grandiose and I feel secure and you're not going to leave me because I've picked someone desperate or whatever it is, the adult arrives. Let's take a look at you. Not through the lens of my needs. I've temporarily sated them. I see. You really, you have a mother. I see. You've got things going on. You have your own feelings. Tell me about it. I have about an hour and a half after my orgasm before I start clawing again and looking around as to see how I'm going to get this and that need met. I see. I could actually do something nice for you. Why not? My child and adolescent has calmed down. You need something. Why not? I'll do something nice for no particular agenda. In a state of temporary adulthood, it's like rising up above the clouds and seeing parts of the psyche that a highly polluted, smog-based cult doesn't see that high a lot of the time. So now you've got the adult. Now the adult does love unconditionally. The adult wants nothing more than to give the deepest love to one's own inner child and adolescent for the sheer joy of seeing the child and adolescent blossom. And the adult wants to see peace on earth, happiness for others. The adult is an empath. And the spiritual adult operates in the transcendent brain. Now, the empathic brain says, wow, you're a human being too. I don't like feeling that. Maybe you don't feel either. Let's be on an equal footing. We'll negotiate, and as long as it's good for me and not good and good for you, etc., you matter as well. It's not all about me. You matter as well. That's the empathic state. Oh my goodness, another human being has feelings as well. And it may not feel good to the empathic brain to destroy someone else's self-esteem so I can get a little power hit. Feels good to the reptile, but not to the empathic brain. The spiritual adult has a bigger awareness. We're connected. We're one. This body does not exist without 300 million trees providing it oxygen on a minute-by-minute basis. I'm loved by trees. This body doesn't exist without several quarts of water provided by the goddess of nature. Millions of people are growing, organizing, selling, moving food from one place to another. Millions of people are shipping it from here in refrigerated containers so that I can eat fruit from this planet that I depend on to live. I'm part of an organism. I'm part of a cult. I'm part of an ecology. I'm part of a planet. I'm part of a relationship. I'm in a marriage. I'm bowing my adolescent and child's insatiable needs and curiosities and lusts to care for another human being, because the marriage is bigger than either one of us. Wow. And it's not just me and her. It's a world. I'm part of a people. I'm part of a possibility field. I'm part of the tapestry of history. I'm an evolving operating system on a planet of intelligent life. Wow. I'm a small piece of divinity. And it's beautiful. Because I see the wonder and tapestry and magnificence of it all. I'm willing to be a small part of something magnificent, rather than the only thing in town in a shithole sociopathic cult paradigm of who's number one. Well, if you're a child and an adolescent, we all know who's number one. It's just you've sacrificed the empathy, the joy, the beauty, the trust. You've sacrificed more than 90% of your grace, of the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources is a part of something bigger than yourself. That when you focus in a dance of synergy and partnership through empathy and transcendence, when you become a small piece of a vast and divine system, the yield of sustainable human well-being, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and logistically, and socially, the yield goes up exponentially, geometrically, when human beings are connected as a small piece of something bigger that is us. There's no separation between the lost, lonely reptilian brain and the beauty of all of it on an evolutionary journey. What 5 people can do in trust-based partnership is 25 times more than they could do as isolated sociopathic egos. The rational brain is in the middle, and that's what we got with fear-based capitalism. You have to treat your customers well or they won't hire you again. It's fear. What if they write a negative review, this, that, and the other? The defense system of the sociopath can be let down, freeing up more than 60% of our energy to create, to develop, to love, to heal our planet, ourselves, and those most in need. It's just invisible. That mathematical field is not real to the reptilian brain. It is suicide. And it is in a reptilian environment. One transcendent individual surrounded by reptiles who feed on the vulnerability of that empathy and transcendence. Is torn apart. But you have the foundation of belief, whether it's Buddha, Christ, Muhammad, unfortunately in a chauvinistic paradigm, it is unimaginable to have the peak deity be female, so we have none. Even the channels, Seth, Lazarus, let's pick another white male for leadership. And why? Well, if your paradigm is too chauvinistic, if a woman comes up, they're disqualified automatically, and so you don't listen to them, so they have no impact. It's like, it's people value people who are high-ranking in their particular cult framework. But you've got this vast tapestry of possibility. Now, a Buddha, a Gandhi, can hold the center in the empathic and transcendent brain. Believe in that mathematical field to such an extent that everyone comes with them. This takes a discipline of belief, a discipline of perception, that is unimaginable for a cult-raised individual, to an isolated, shame-based, traumatized reptile who believes deep down that they are unlovable, that evil is greater than good. The mathematics are clear. The empathic and the transcendent brain, dormant but ready to function in every person on the planet. It's like an Android phone, a Samsung Note 10, that's in every pocket on the planet that lacks an operating system, which, if given the data and focused on, could bring data to every location on the planet. But it's not being used because they're too busy using a pick and shovel. It's unconceivable. What could Google and apps and video conferencing and reading articles and studying on YouTube, what could they possibly bring? We've got to grow rice. We have a computer slot waiting for the adult disk in every single person on the planet. There's no problem with the computers. The problem is with the software. And the software comes from the cult. And the cult has one agenda above all other agendas: protect and defend the norms of the cult. However cruel, however insane, however schizophrenic, however sociopathic, however barbaric and outdated, it's us. And no one's going to take us away from me, because I'm afraid of the unknown, I'm afraid of the feminine, I'm afraid of the mystery, I'm afraid of the possibility field, I'm afraid. No one's going to take us away from us and confront us with the unknown, with the other. The other that mathematically speaking is 99.9999% of the whole. Whatever it is that is us is the smallest part in relationship with the unknown, with the mystery, with the other, with the unconscious, with the feminine. The mathematics of defending the us, a sliver of a sliver of a sliver, one of 10,000 cults in human history, most of which are now extinct, more going extinct every day. But we're going to hang on to the very last bit, to us, to me, my coherent pattern of identity, handed down by someone who, heaven knows why we listen to them, handed down by the person and told, hang on to this. You're part of this family. You're part of this cult. You're a Rockefeller. Hang on to this. We do this and we don't do this. Hang on. Don't let anyone take it away from you. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Defend the identity. Against what? The entirety of all that is and could be. Don't be tempted. It'll look, never, hang on. And that's our definition of success. I hung on. I was faithful to my program. And now I die in peace, knowing I did my job, and that my son will carry on the tradition in all of its stupidity, in all of its cruelty, in all of its blindness for several generations. Hopefully they still have a planet then, but we have to make some sacrifices. Hang on to us. Us is just a pattern of thought, of feeling, of words, and action in a patterned relationship with its environment. That's us. How do we know it's us? Well, I think the same way I did yesterday. It must be me. I could just wake up and think intelligent things today, but it doesn't feel right. It wouldn't be me. I can't just... They lock people up. This is crazy. You're not yourself. Go to a hospital and take some drugs. We don't like change. We don't like it in ourselves, and we certainly don't like it in others. Go back and do things the way you did things before. Hopefully you'll grow out of this spiritual phase and get a real job cutting down trees. It's very challenging to hold the belief when you've experienced the sheer weight of that baseball bat by a giant and the complete and utter helplessness of realizing that there's nothing you can do but shut down. Because the rage in the sociopath is not yet spent. They're bigger, and they've been given the power role as an untrained and incompetent parent in relationship to the innocence of infants. How do you stand? With bleeding cheeks and busted nose. You can't worry about the empathic brain. And what you learn is that this is weak. It could get you killed. It could be off daydreaming as the wonder of things, and you're the target for the pickpocket. Be smart. Lock the doors. You're surrounded by reptiles. And yet, 99.999% of everything that's intelligent, of everything that will be, of everything that's magnificent, is out there in the unknown, in the beauty of what could be, in the face of the feminine. The masculine is the point. The feminine is the womb. The masculine is the planet. The universe is 99.99% space. The masculine is the ego identity and the coherence of that pattern. The feminine is the unconscious grace that is around all of us all the time. It's a threat to the traumatized ego, to the traumatized masculine, because it's so big. As big as it is, as we relate to it with empathy, with rationality, and transcendence. You don't give up rationality. It's your tether to the observation of patterns. You don't give up awareness of the operating systems around you. But once you've seen the mathematical formula, once you've watched the efficiencies on the intelligence continuum explode exponentially, and you realize all we're missing is software, that we're one generation away, not in reality in terms of our actual momentum. We could destroy the planet before we figure this out. But in the possible, we are one generation away, maybe 3, if we put our minds to this with the same attention we put our minds to World War II, and will willingly put our minds and our lives into World War III. To the science of the empathic and transcendent brain and 10x culture, 10x thinking, the discipline to focus on the question, who's in the most pain, how can we help? It's unbelievable to the reptile, but self-evident and obvious to the empath and the transcendent brain. So we have a few people in 100 years that can hold that field to know this truth through the fog of reptilian thinking. It takes a tremendous amount of mathematical certainty to hold that center. Because the program of fear that is forcibly injected into the psyche with each traumatic wound in childhood by grown giants who are terrified of their own empathic brain. It takes a lot. Our great leaders have always been those few who stayed tethered to the grace of the future. And that is the adult. That is the spiritual adult. That is the possibility elusive every time the child and adolescent's needs are unmet and the foundation of the adult crumbles. The adult rests on the platform in the Thai temples. You will see half animal, half human gargoyles holding up the base of the psyche. They are at the bottom, and they provide the platform to feed the animal, to feed and meet the needs of the half human in each one of us. Then they provide the backbone of support for the increasing complexity, grace, and geometry of the pinnacle of consciousness and the psyche that rests on their backs. The spire that rests on the half-human, half-animal who has been fed, who has been nourished, provides the foundation. When the spire gets too self-referential, when the transcendent brain will not tend to the child and adolescent, when the leader will not care for the smallest in their circle. That's why in the Russian fairy tales and the old myths, Ivan the Fool, who is the innocent one and the youngest, always outperforms the elder brothers who represent the cult norm. They go out on the adventure. The elder people get the big horse, the shiny sword. They're the firstborn. They're the one that Dad wants to carry on the cult legacy and inherit the throne. Life sends the king a curveball, and he sends his oldest son out. He gets trapped in the maze of complexity, lost in his own ego. The second son goes out. They meet old women along the way, but they have no time for them. They meet the hungry mice along the way, but they're important people. They'd never waste time with the little one. But Ivan the Fool, with his raggedy pony, reluctantly given the job after everyone else fails, because the cult believes in might, in its own dogma, expects the high rank in the cult to do the job. Except what is high in the cult is always small and blind in relationship to the unknown, because the cult is a battlement, a castle in defense of the unknown. The egoic structure is the bastion whose primary goal is to keep out the feminine, which means it's the weakest part of the self to venture out into the unknown and solve the mystery. It's always a mouse that provides the critical aid, an old beggar who the older princes were too arrogant to feed, who tells Ivan the Fool, the simpleton, the one who has not been fully brainwashed in the cult, the secret to break out of the self-referential loop and solve the disease that's plaguing the system outside the system, which means you have to be humble to the power of what your cult holds in contempt. It is the opposite of your cult that leads to the renewal of the cult, which is why our Native American ancestors did not trust a young man until they had had a vision in a transcendent state initiated by elders that took them out of their cult's orbit, out of the Earth's orbit into the larger flows of life and mystery, and gave them a gift that could not be found in their fathers, to bring this sacred chalice back as the water of life that would renew the cult that by definition is self-corrupting in its differentiation from the whole, in its standardized identity. You could not be of use to a growing living cult unless you had found the part of yourself that exists outside the tapestry of your own self-referential dogma. Then you could be counted on to be an adult, because you would not listen to the past. You would follow the North Star revealed in a vision. The smartest, healthiest cult members understand the toxicity and inherent danger of the cult, and want leaders who are transcendent, who are embracing the unknown. This is the adult. This is the one capable of unconditional love. This is the one who will protect the innocence of the sacred fool with their life, who will water the plant that gives birth to the future, who will honor the sacred domain of imagination, and will open arms to the healing unknown and change, and negotiate the transformation with their cult. When these figures show up in a marriage, they must still love, adore, cherish, and honor, and protect the self-centered narcissistic child and adolescent with fidelity, with honor, with the devotion of a parent that does not ask a child to be more than a child, for the great reward, having allayed the terror and insecurity, having allayed the lust of the animal, of watching the field erupt out of the empathic and transcendent brain in one's partner, arcing together to form a third energy, bigger than either one. That is a marriage between an adult. And you don't get there without championing the little boy and the little girl and the adolescent inside and out. Unconditional love is the second story on a highly conditional, highly narcissistic, highly animalistic contract of marriage. Marriage is a contract and it is a love. The contract is the foundation and must be honored, or the energy field of the adult collapses and becomes the lowest form that it refused to honor.